again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Alumni Chats, a weekly podcast featuring alumni from the Department of Broadcasting and Journalism here at Western Illinois University. My name is Buzz Hoon. I'm the host of the podcast. Today, I'm talking with a good friend and former student, Andrew Bacon, from the class of 2015. Andrew, how are you?
I'm great, Buzz. I'm doing really great. You know, my personal update right now is last December, my wife and I had our first child, Miles Bacon.
Yay.
So we're kind of living in that world of figuring out parenthood right now. I'm actually in the nursery because everywhere else is chaotic except the nursery. But I'm doing great. I'm in my 7th year at the ACC, which was the first place I left Western Illinois for. So I've been doing great here, living in Greensboro, North Carolina. It's been awesome. We're taking it one day, one cry at a time right now.
I couldn't be happier for you, Andrew. You know, and if for somebody that grew up, you know, with his family having to move around, you've been located in the South and enjoy that part of the country.
Yeah, no, we were in the South and Florida specifically for about 5 years, and so when I got my position at the ACC, it was a little bit of, okay, well, I kind of know what to expect, but please don't be as hot as Florida because, I'm not about that life. And thankfully, it's not quite as bad. July, August, a little brutal. But, man, I tell you what, November, even early December sometimes, we're still going out on walks in shorts and a T-shirt, maybe long sleeve on the occasion. So we love the temperature. My wife's from here, so, she, of course, is all about it. She'll stay away from the cold if she can,
So you're telling me you missed the snow?
I like the snow. Okay, I do. And our dogs love the snow. So when we do get snow, we enjoy it. But man, Buzz, Florida, it was too south. We didn't get any snow. And so I didn't experience that in the South, but being in kind of like the middle South, it snows, everything shuts down. They don't have the infrastructure to really take care of the snow. So my first snow day in probably 2015, 2016, work emails, hey, office is closed. We got too much snow. And I'm like, man, it's like an inch. But that's just the way it is here. There's just nothing you can do about it. So it's a little bit different. Things are a little quieter when there's snow days. Not quite as, life continues in Illinois.
So Andrew, we're going to talk about the things that impacted you and may have shaped you into who you are as an adult. And so we're going to start talking about your family and what kind of things you like to do, because you mentioned that you grew up in some of the time in Florida and you end up moving to Illinois. Well, what kind of things did a young Andrew like to do for fun?
A young Andrew loves sports. And probably like a lot of people, especially those in sports broadcasting, I just love to do anything with sports. I love to watch sports. I did do Boy Scouts. I did some of the kind of, video games, all the kind of classic stuff, but I did sports. And I think the interesting thing about that is no one in my family really likes sports that much. Huh. I was really the only, I don't know if I ever told you that, Buzz, but I was the only one that really got into sports. And I don't even know why. I was honestly, the only thing that made me different was I was always really fast. Like growing up, my mom had me on a leash when I was a kid. I was that kid that ran around all the time. Go, go, go. I think my mom told me that I ran before I walked. And so being a good runner, you can play any sport. Might not have been good at basketball, but hey, I could run around and whatnot. So I love sports growing up. I did Boy Scouts, so more outdoor kind of stuff. And then my family was more a video game family. So we did that quite a bit. But I'll tell you a quick story. When I got to North Carolina, my parents made the visit after we had already moved up here, probably 6 months later, and we're going to, it's called the Tanger Outlets. It's like a little outside shopping mall, and they have a Nike store. And we're walking through this Nike store. My mom's like, hey, Andrew, points at this blue shirt and goes, what's a Duke? And that's, being in North Carolina, I'm like, Mom, you're one of 3 people in the state of North Carolina that doesn't know what Duke is. That's just the kind of family I kind of grew up in. It wasn't all about sports. My mom's from Nebraska, so she knows Nebraska. That's about it. And then my dad was military, and so he kind of moved around a little bit too much to have a huge fandom, but he followed briefly the Lakers and stuff like that from his time in California, but he was never a diehard. So I was the black sheep of the family liking sports.
Wow. And so when you gave some indication that you were sports crazy, I'm sure were wondering how to respond and whether or not to encourage you to do this or not.
No, exactly. Because my older brother, he had played baseball, but he'd had a bad experience. And so for them going to all these different games growing up, that was something that I think I was kind of a little bit more committed to it. So they kind of saw that more committed lifestyle. And so in middle school, when I, was looking at high school classes the year before I'd get to high school, I saw there was this thing called sports broadcasting. I'm like, man, that sounds pretty cool. And so I kind of looked into it some more. You had to take intro to broadcasting classes to get there. And so I was like, man, I like to obviously do all the sports stuff that I already mentioned. But I was like, I was told that as a little kid that I was actually decent with one of those really old disposable cameras. And so that was something that kind of, for me, just for whatever reason, it stuck out. I don't know if I ever told you this, but my dad was actually a hobbyist photographer. So a little bit, it kind of, that part was in me a little bit. Yeah, right. So, and I honestly, I never really thought too much about it. And so I was like, oh, so that's what those old club trophies were in the basement. I didn't know what they were. But then my sister took a photography class about the same time, I think, that I was realizing this was a thing. And so I went ahead in high school and I started doing it. I loved it. I instantly just thought this was the coolest thing. I did some basketball games in high school freshman year and kind of learned more about it. But I think for my parents, I don't know that they realized how important it would be for me until probably maybe year 2 when I was doing the Rush, which was our high school sports show. Freshman year was all the intro classes. And so I think that was probably when it became, maybe this is more of a thing than just like Boy Scouts where it's extracurricular. Maybe this is something that can, stick with them. And so, I was doing these basketball, honestly, mostly basketball, but I had some hockey games, a little bit of football and whatnot. But I think the extra time I spent at school to do those things is probably what really showed my interest in it. And so I was so interested in doing sports or doing this broadcasting that I never really had a job except for seasonal help. And so in the fall and the spring, I really committed to those things. And I think by junior, senior year, it was like, okay, like this is probably what he's going to do. And for me, that was when I was starting to realize, maybe this is a career I can make for myself.
Now, we have to let all our listeners and viewers know you're part of the very famous Chatham-Glenwood high school pipeline that we have between WIU and Chatham-Glenwood with Kyle Durkeen, Sean Ingracia, Danny Fry, and now Andrew Bacon. And that has been a very, very, very good pipeline for WIU. And it all connects in many ways back to Mr. Bandy as well.
Yes. Yeah. So my high school teacher was Ryan Bandy. He was awesome. He was a really great teacher. He had come from the program itself. So when he graduated from college, I think a couple of years later, maybe right away, he got a job at the school. And so he kind of had a lot of pride and passion for what it was called GCNN was, which was our news network. That's what we had our call letters. And so he brought a lot of passion. We had a lot of really, really talented students. It wasn't just the 4 of us that you mentioned. There are a couple twins right now who are doing stuff for NBA, NHL. I think they're actually shooting the NBA finals. And so we have a lot of people who have gone on to do broadcasting because of this program and because of the teacher, Ryan Bandy. So I mean, huge kudos to them.
And I tried to get those twins to come to WIU.
You did. Yeah. They went to the other Western. They went to WKU. But it's still good people, but they're not purple, so they're red. But it was a great program. And, for me, to kind of show the lineage, I never met Kyle. I heard a lot about him in high school. I heard a lot about him at Western. But Sean Ingracia, he was a senior when I was a freshman. And so we didn't really hang out that much or anything like that, but you saw him work. And he was the reason why I first got introduced to Western, because I know you and some other faculty members actually made the trip to Chatham and watched him do one of his meteorology segments. I'm sure you probably watched him do some of the sports stuff. And that was when Western got on my radar. And so seeing someone such as Sean, who was so, so well regarded as a person pursuing this career, even then, he was one of the leaders. His class was, I think, a little bit slimmer with people in broadcasting. It was the year after him that there was a bunch of people involved. And so he was the person a lot of people looked to. And so seeing him go to Western and seeing his success, that really stuck out to me and what Western could do. And no matter whether you were me or another student, there were tons of students who considered Western Illinois because of the fact that Western showed by their faculty coming up, they cared and they had a desire to help develop. They didn't just want Sean to keep doing what he was doing. They wanted Sean to develop and become what he is now. And so I think Western, because of those interactions in this pipeline, really it stayed at our high school. And it was something that Western was always one of the options in our broadcasting classes that were talked about because of that success and because of those people who did great things. But Sean was awesome. And it's kind of weird, but Sean was a senior, I was a freshman, I was a senior, Danny was a freshman. And so it was this kind of this weird, perfect thing where when I was at Western, I was talking to Sean, he's like, all right, who you got next? I was like, well, this guy, Danny Fry, who I'm trying to get to come here, he'd be great, and it's funny because our skills are so different. We're not copy and paste. I either I told Danny or I told Sean this once, I was like, if you would have had all three of us all be the same age, you would have had the best editor with Sean. You'd have someone who's obsessed with shooting video with me. And then you have Danny who loved to be on camera, and you would have this perfect 3-man ship. But I think it worked out so well the way it did is because Sean was so good at shooting and editing. I was kind of good in that way as well, but he was also really good at hosting. And so he was able to mentor me a little bit and kind of help me round out where I wasn't as good. And then when Danny came up, I wasn't as good about hosting, but shooting and editing, that was my thing. And so I was able to help him a little bit, kind of round up his skills. And so it was kind of a cool thing where we all had different things I would say we were best at, but we were all able to kind of help each other in different ways, get better in maybe our other areas we weren't as, proficient in.
And so you were on my radar early on. I got to know you, and, trying to recruit you to come to WIU was very important for me because I was like, this young man, we need to have, we absolutely need to have. And I think it was finally, I said, you can host the coaches show, you can be whatever you need to have. And that was a big thing for you coming in. I remember even when you were before freshman year, you were trying to work on your reading off the teleprompter.
Yeah. I, it's funny when I officially announced, which definitely isn't what it is now, that I was going to school, I just put on my Facebook, just like change the info to going to Western Illinois, and Sean commented on it. It was just like, you didn't tell me. And he, messaged me or commented whatever it was back then, all these different things. And I was just like, man, I'm so excited. Like, I'm even more excited. I didn't really think I needed to let anyone know. I just, I guess that's just not the way it was back then. And so for me, I think coming to Western, I had done a lot in high school that had, really helped me become what I was, but I didn't want those accolades to kind of assume that I should get things or anything like that.
Right.
I came in, and the way I looked at, Sean always joked, he's like, my freshman year I redshirted. And then I started playing my sophomore year, where Sean would tell me, you're a true freshman. You're a 4-star, a 5-star, whatever he'd say to me. But he's like, you're in the, you're in it right now. You're not waiting. And that's just how I am. Like, I'm not someone who wants to just sit there and kind of get by. I want to be in the middle of it. I want to learn immediately, and sometimes maybe to a fault. But I knew with Sean, I only had 1 year with Sean. I didn't get a lot from high school out of him because I think the freshman to senior difference in high school is much greater than in college. When you're in college, I think you feel a little bit closer than you are in high school. And so I knew I wanted to try and learn as much as I could from Sean and be under his wing. And so being able to travel as a freshman, being able to kind of get different assignments from him on what to do, and then spending that time with you, Buzz, or Sean, to get better as an anchor was huge for me. Because I was like, I don't want to pick up what has essentially been this Glenwood High School tradition and mess up the show. Like, to me, that was what I just didn't want to have happen. And so, those little things are so important to me to try and be as good as I can. And it's how you get better in your craft, whether it's broadcasting or something else. You got to practice it. And you can't rely on yourself just to be able to study yourself off a recording. having you, having Sean, having whoever who can kind of give you feedback, live feedback, no matter as frustrating as it was with Sean, because he was, he didn't, wait until I'd finished my paragraph. He would cut me off in the middle of my word and be like, stop, redo, stop, redo, stop, redo. And it was frustrating. Like, I'd get frustrated. I couldn't show it, but I would get so frustrated. I'm like, dude, let me finish what I'm saying. but it helped. It was that reminder that eventually gets in your head. And when you're practicing, you're like, no, stop, take a deep breath, a couple seconds, restart. And so between you and him, it was so helpful.
Yeah, well, and over your 4 years, you were shooting like crazy. I mean, you were traveling, as you said, with the football team, which must have been. I mean, there must have been some fun parts and some fun stories associated with that.
Oh yeah, 100%. Every year Western would play. It just so happened to be typically a Big 10 or a Big 12 team, and so those are obviously matchups that are exciting, just because you're like, man, what if we're the App State over Michigan, or what if we're that crazy team that upset someone? And then, but really more on top of it, it was just the atmosphere, getting to go to a place like that, because, obviously going to Wisconsin, we went there and that was their home opener that we played them. And so it was packed. They were playing little old Western Illinois and it was packed. And that game I'll never forget. I think it was 9-3 or 6-3 at the half. And we're like, oh my gosh, we have a chance. And Wisconsin had this running back, Melvin Gordon, who at that, I think it was a couple of weeks later, he was one of the top contenders for the Heisman. His only blimp was against Western Illinois, who was the only team to hold him under 100 yards. I think we had him like at 60 or 70, something crazy like that. But it was moments like that were so cool, because you got to see your team compared against the national level. You got to see those campuses on game day. You got to shoot your guys playing against these teams that you see on TV nationally every week. And so those moments were super fun, but you can't forget about the moments in between on the bus rides with your colleagues. It wasn't just me traveling. We had some commentators that would come up. We had a second videographer. Typically it was Justin Jackson. But you had those moments where you got to have some real friendship and develop some real relationship with those people that you obviously continue to, appreciate as you go out throughout college, because working together is such a huge deal. And so between being able to collaborate on the road and then getting to experience those once in a lifetime moments is awesome. Like, to this day, I still get butterflies shooting a football game on the sidelines. It's just, you go to a stadium, no matter if it's packed or it's not, it's just so exciting, because those players, they want to win. And it's such a big deal to them and their season. And especially in college football, that it's big time. It feels so awesome to be a part of it all.
Yeah. It's funny how your experience shooting on the sidelines, and working with athletics, all those kind of things were, even in my, I'm glad we were providing those opportunities, not knowing that those were kind of things that would help you in your career. Because as we get along here and we talk about what you're doing, we didn't even know the importance of how that would translate to what your job would be, and at the level that you're doing it. Let's talk a little bit about some of the other people that, whether it's students, faculty, that you talked with Justin Jackson. You were part of, I think, on T5, right?
Yeah, T5. I think we're the first T5 people, and so you had so many great people off that floor, obviously, who are still doing great things. You had Jeff, you have Tyler Eddy, you have Juan. I mean, Juan right now, I think he just announced he's going to USC to go be one of their video guys. But Dave Mitch, obviously, you have a lot of these talented people that have gone on to do great things, and a lot of them had success right away. And I think a lot of times you hear these stories of people who they don't find immediate success, which is okay. Like, that's an okay thing to do. But we just seem to have a lot of people that had a lot of success pretty quickly or within the first 2 years, because it just seemed like everyone was kind of finding their thing. But I think part of it's because we had this culture, this group of people who pushed each other, who were friends, who give each other critiques. And, I think when you see one person go, the natural competitor news, you want to go with them, and I think that's what we kind of had, is this kind of fun group that, a lot of us had a background, and we knew this is what we wanted to do. And so from day one, we were together. And then, till the final days at Western Illinois, we were still doing what we were doing. And so to have so many talented people in that class is pretty crazy when you look back. I was at our basketball media day last fall for the ACC, and I saw Jeff, and I was just like, Jeff Martin. I was like, Jeff, you didn't tell me you're coming to our event. And so, we hung out for probably about an hour, just talking, catching up. And it's just crazy. You see someone and you haven't seen them in years, and it just seems like time hasn't flown by. You ask about people maybe you're not as close with, and kind of hear a little bit about their stories and what they're going through right now. And so it's just really cool, because those relationships, whether they're good relationships or they're your best friend, you see them later. And because of that connection of the same university, I think you're like, I know this person. Like, we may not have been best friends, but I know you because our experiences are similar. We went through our trying times, we went through our great times together. And I think that instantly, no matter who you see, you're wanting to talk to them, because you're like, oh my gosh, like, when's the last time you've been to Macomb, or when's this or that? I was at a convention a couple of years ago, and I ran into Casey and Juan, and they were there, and talked to them, and they ended up winning that studio for you guys.
Yeah.
And so it's just always so exciting to run into former Leathernecks. Kyle Sashberger, obviously a couple years older than I am, but every ACC event I see him, and it's instantly like, I didn't know you in college, you didn't know me in college, except the one time you visited as an alumni. But instantly we feel like we know each other. We instantly feel like, hey, we have a friendship because of just, I think, the Western Illinois connection that we have. And able to say, hey, man, how are you doing? And be real, not just like, oh, yeah, it's okay, but be really real with each other and be able to connect that way.
Yeah. Eric Fry at Virginia Tech.
Eric Fry. Yeah. I can't believe I missed, it's funny. A quick story about Eric Fry. My senior year, if you remember, I was starting to get anxious in the fall about what I was going to do next year, which now I'm like, gosh, I was so worried about this. But, I was asking you, hey, do you have people we can reach out to? And so, you gave me Eric Fry's email, and I reached out to Eric Fry, and he had just made the move to go from, I think, Florida State to Arkansas. And so he didn't get back to me right away. And so I emailed again, or he emailed me a month later, and he gave me this email that was so helpful. It meant a lot to me, knowing that there's this guy right now who's really doing big time things with Arkansas and the SEC. And for him to take time away when he just got this job to send this to me and gave me a lot of great advice. And he was the first one I really reached out to. And later on, I'd get encouragement from some of the SIDs at Western to reach out cold email to a bunch of videos. So I literally picked the most random video departments I could think of. And the crazy thing is I probably emailed 20, 25 different people. I got a response from 6. And of those 6, half of them were in the ACC. And so when I eventually got to the ACC, I got to thank some of those people in person and tell them how much I appreciated that email. But with Eric Fry, he would eventually go from Arkansas to Virginia Tech. And I finally got to meet him in person. And I see him all the time during our annual meetings. We'll meet for our video directors meetings. I'll see him when I go to Virginia Tech for football or basketball games. And, even though, again, I only know him through these interactions, because of that WIU connection, we instantly know each other and we instantly have a bond there. And so I'm so appreciative of those relationships with those types of people, because you get so much out of it. And so my one advice I'll say to students listening to this is just, cold emails, you hear, I think, a lot of kind of good and bad about it. And you can't, you got to take your shot. It's like the quote, you miss, the shots you don't take. And so you got to take the shot, because you never know what's going to happen. Like I said, I got 6 out of 25, and those 6 people didn't get me my job, but they gave me advice that led me to the job that I did eventually get.
Yeah, so. And that's great advice. That hopefully our students will understand that sometimes sometimes it's a simple connection that you end up making, and later on, sometimes it pays off in some ways. So let's talk a little bit about some of the faculty, some of the things you enjoyed doing at WIU, and how that led to your development.
Yeah, so I love the faculty at Western. It's funny. I consider them more my friends than faculty. I know I was in your office all the time, Buzz. We were, honestly, you're one of my best friends at Western, and being able to say that was such a big deal to me, because I just felt like there's a real friendship / mentorship. I feel like I could really talk to you, and obviously you could talk to me from the perspective of having been a student, but then you could also give me those guiding words. And so you had obviously other professors such as Sam Edsel, Jasmine was there, John, you obviously had Tom. I mean, the amount of time I spent in Tom's office just hanging out with him and chatting with him was always just fun. Obviously, you had great, and no one talks about him, but you had great secretaries. Bobby and Barb were phenomenal. Those two were the smiling faces that you saw every day. I couldn't imagine a soul didn't like those two ladies. And so a big shout out to both of them, because they're people that I to this day think of and am thankful. Even though they weren't teaching me things, they were just, if you were having a bad day, they were people who could lift you up, and they were people who always just so kind. And so it didn't matter who you were, they were just so friendly. But my relationships with the faculty was awesome. I didn't have a bad thing. Obviously, Sean eventually became a faculty member while I was there, and Roger, can't forget Roger. I felt like these professors, these faculty were my friends and my mentors. I felt like I could talk to them about anything, but I also knew the professional relationship that existed and the respect that we had for each other. And so, we talked about those great memories on the football, on the road, and those other things. And ultimately, the thing I remember the most is always those relationships. I remember when I left Western, I think I wrote all the ones that I'd had my 4 years with. I wrote them a little letter just kind of thanking them for what they did for me in my 4 years, because I was 2 hours from home, which now doesn't seem far, but when you're as in it as I was, they might as well have been halfway across the world. And so to have these adults who kind of you look at as a family really supported me and really helped me with my development, whether it was you sitting down with me at the desk getting better as a host, obviously Sam helping me with the edits, Roger from a news perspective. That's not what I wanted, but there's a lot of things I was able to get from Roger that helped me out with my show at the time. Jasmine was there I think my last year and a half, maybe 2 years. And so there's a lot of things that she kind of brought in. And so there's those different people that come in your life that help you in different ways. And that's what they did. Like I said, I came in really good at shooting, put myself through the ringer with how much I shot, but editing and hosting, producing, those are all things I definitely didn't have as much experience with. And through the mentorship with everyone really helped me learn those things. With the truck productions that we did so frequent, we had productions at my high school, but it wasn't a truck. It was like a 2-camera operations, and getting to understand how that works as a team. I mean, that was huge. That was absolutely huge.
Well, and the fact that, and I'll just be honest about this, athletics found out about the talents of Andrew Bacon, and they wanted, they don't offer a major in athletics, but they wanted you. Yeah. And they were, and so there are a lot of people over there that were very supportive as well. Definitely.
Yeah. We had a great athletic department support staff. So my sophomore year was, and now you can blame it on Sean, Buzz, if you want, but Sean introduced me to athletics. So it's all Sean's
I know. Fault.
Well, so Sean drugged me in, basically saying, I'm going to be an SID. I can't show all these games. But there's this other student, his name's Andrew Bacon, and he could definitely fill in the gaps. And so I get introduced to Kelsey, at the time Homewood, and she's new. She's marketing, in charge of marketing and athletics, and she offers me an internship with athletics. And I was, I don't think I really knew what that meant other than I was shooting sports, which I mean, I love. I was already doing it, but I was nervous but excited about it. And so they start having me do some marketing promotion campaigns, their yearly basketball PSAs for men and women's, shooting it. Now I'm kind of in this situation where I'm figuring out, do I do the truck production with broadcasting, or do I do the camera on the sideline or wherever the venue was? And so that was an interesting dynamic that I worked out with Sean, where we split our time up, where that way he could fulfill his duties and I could still do some production stuff. And then I would also shoot for athletics. But, meeting Kelsey and being under her wing for a couple of years, my senior year, I was officially under Pat Osterman, a tremendous leader. Him and his department, Kyle Bratt. Obviously had Sean there for 2 of my years. You had Dan Wallace, Jay Garneau, Matt Fisher, who was also from the broadcasting program. Ben Winterode was there as an intern, I know. And so, who now is at Clemson. So I see him all the time. But That relationship with athletics gave me a different perspective of broadcasting, and it kind of let me be a little bit more of in a world of serving a client,
Right. Right.
and getting that feedback on on another different kind of real world. And so having the teaching from broadcasting and having those truck productions and the other things I did for broadcasting, like the pigskin preview, and then being on the other side of also being on what's now the creative side of athletic media, kind of gave me both worlds. And at the time, I didn't realize that they were different. I thought they were all kind of the same, to be honest. But the further this world has continued to evolve, those two things are being more and more separated. And so I kind of had the best of both, where I got to experience both those different lives. And my time in broadcasting and my time in athletics shaped me for what my skill sets became, and really helped me get to the ACC and do what I do for them, because there have been multiple times that I've actually helped out with our golf productions. And those are things that I understood and in some way was a assistant producer, assistant director, whatever, because I knew how that truck production dynamic went. I'd never done golf at Western, but you can take what you did for basketball, baseball, softball, whatever the sport, and you can apply it to other sports. Yeah. And then obviously, there are many times right now where I'm on the sidelines of a football game shooting it just like I did for athletics. And so those two worlds have helped shape me with what I can do at the ACC and make me more of a Swiss Army knife as opposed to just one or the other. And so being able to do both was huge for me. And it gave you that real life experience that I don't think everywhere offers you.
Well, I was always somewhat protective and a little jealous that other people were trying to take Andrew away from me, including you came one day and because your minor was marketing, and our mutual friend / professor, Jim Kenny, who decided he wanted to play joke on me.
He did. Yeah. So I'd actually started out thinking I was going to minor in journalism. Then I'd had this journalism class where the teacher basically was just like, because she'd assumed that your major would be journalism, that it's okay to have completely different minors, or it's also okay to have complementary ones. And so that's when I kind of thought back a little bit, and I was like, I know they're combined now at Western, but at the time I was like, maybe it'd be good to try something that would enhance it more than just complement it. You know what I mean? Like kind of be a little different, but maybe give me a different perspective. And so I started marketing. And had a number of different great professors, but one that really stood out was Professor Kenny. And he's just one of those guys that jokes around, but he's serious, and he's really knowledgeable about what he knows. And him and Buzz are great friends. He tells me this because he knows I'm from broadcasting, because almost every one of my projects is related to broadcasting, so it's pretty obvious. And he says, "Hey, I want you to do something for me. Can you go into Buzz's office this week and just tell him you're switching majors and you're going to switch to marketing and you're going to have broadcasting be your minor?" And I was just like, I don't know, Buzz might not be very happy about that. He's like, "Just do it. Just trust me. Just do it." And so, okay. So I go into Buzz. I probably went in that day, and I went over to Buzz's office, and, Barb's sitting there at the secretary. I say, "Hello," real nice. And I walk in, I'm like, "Buzz, I guess I got to talk to you about something serious." I'm trying to pull out all the sad emotion. I'm like, "I'm really sorry, but I've really thought about things, and I'm going to switch to marketing." What? Buzz was so upset with me, and I'm like, "Buzz, I'm just kidding, I promise." And he's just like, "Andrew," and then Barb. I think Barb was the one that told me to leave.
She did.
And so it was moments like that just showed our relationship. Buzz had obviously given so much of his time as my junior year I did this too, and for me to be like. But it was classic. It was great. I'm sure you gave him a lot of heck when you saw him next.
Yes, I did. We used to meet for lunch and things, and so he still owes me for that. That's for sure. So Andrew, when you graduate, and as you said, you were concerned about how things would turn out, you ended up getting this internship with the ACC, right?
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about that. And then also you ended up signing up for a second tour.
Yes. Yeah. So before we get to it, just because I think it is helpful. So I was applying for numerous jobs. I'd set up my spring schedule. So if I wanted to, I could do it all virtually. Obviously, it didn't happen. But in the spring semester, I was starting to get worried about jobs. And so I remember I had my first interview with Bradley, didn't go well. And then that was actually in December. And then in February, I had an interview with the ACC. It was a phone interview. I had my notes. I written out everything I planned on to say. I was just like, man, I'm ready for this. I do this interview and I felt great. I talked a little too much, but I felt great about it. And so the very next day, I had this interview with Six Flags. And man, I was feeling so great. And so that interview was super easy. But all this time, those 2 months of January and February, I was so worried because I had applied to all these jobs. I didn't hear anything. Well, March, I do the in-person interview with the ACC. It's great. It's awesome. They offer me a week later. But after that experience, throughout April and May, I got probably 5 different phone calls of people wanting to interview me and all those things. And so this is just a message, just, hey, like when you're applying for stuff, know that sometimes employers are really slow. And so don't get too down on yourself if you're not hearing back right away, because it takes time. It really does. And so for me, that was something that I really learned. Thankfully I had the position with the ACC, so my nerves had gone down. But if I hadn't, I just needed to wait. I just need to be patient. So that's just something I wanted to say. But with the ACC, so I took that job in March. It started, which by the way, your references are huge. I was told after I got the job, they swore one of my references, who may be on this call, could have been my father. Like they if the other 2 references wasn't as good, they would have questioned the first one. And so that's how important it is to have really good relationships. But so I start in July with the ACC. My first event is ACC football kickoff, which is, I don't know what that is, because that's something that really mostly I think happens just at the Power 5 at that time. And so I get to help out with this event that has all 14 of our football coaches. And so this was an ACC allowed me to kind of start to see things differently, where now you're working with these 14 different schools, and how do you show, kind of the different sides of them, their stories, but also you need to be equal as possible. And so with the ACC, I was hired as an intern. It was a 1-year internship. I don't know if I knew exactly what I was going to be doing. So that's why that football kickoff event was kind of big. So I think that was the event that made me really realize what I was getting in for, just kind of the importance of sharing that publicity of each of those schools. But, that first year internship, I didn't shoot any football in the fall. They didn't let interns just go shoot with their equipment, which, I never really questioned it, because their cameras were like $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 pieces of equipment. So like for me, I'd never used that type of camera before. And so of course I wanted to shoot, and I shot with one of their older ones, some of the Olympic sports stuff, but I really took those first few months, focused a little bit on editing, and then a little bit on just being a grip and learning why his name is Slim, why Slim shot the way he did. We had a freelancer at the time who's shooting fan stuff. Like he was going to all of our football stadiums and just shooting fan stuff for future PSA use. So I was like, hey, one weekend, can I go with him? And so, at the ACC, I kind of got to do a lot of learning those first 4 months. And so, that was big for me, because I hadn't really ever stepped back except during the summers. Like the summers for me in school was when I always stepped back and just kind of watched a lot of sports. And it always helped me grow. I always felt the following fall that I would grow, because I would step back and kind of be more an observant. But now in the football season, I'm being more an observant, and it helped me so much. Like it was frustrating at times, because I'm like, man, I'm used to being on the football field shooting stuff. But it really helped me, and it set me up, because in January or in December, when we're going down to our football championship game, my boss, Scott, he was talking to me. He's like, what are you thinking about doing? You're at the halfway point. And I tell him, honestly, I really like what I do here. I just wish I got to shoot more. I just wish I could shoot. And I said, honestly, I really like, though, the people here are great. The culture here is great. I mean, it's the ACC. It's a Power 5 conference. Like, this is awesome. And so in January, end of January, he has me go to lunch with him. And we're talking. He's like, hey, so I kind of thought about what you had to say. Would you, this is like an unofficial, but more official than in December, would you really have interest in coming back? And I was just like, Yeah, no, I definitely would, because in this internship was a full-time internship. There's kind of two different tiers. There's the volunteer ones and there's the paid ones. And so I was one of the paid ones. So it wasn't like there's a bunch of us. There's five,
Right.
I think five of us, and we're all serving different departments. But it had never been asked before if someone could be a repeat intern. And so he had asked, he said, I kind of started the conversations, but before I went further, I wanted to see if you really have interest because we've never really done this before. And I was just like, if you can get me to shoot some football games, which would require getting another one of those cameras, then yeah, like I would definitely want to do it because it would help me grow as a professional. Because in the spring they had told me I was going to start shooting a lot more than I was, and so we had started to look at renting a camera until they actually got one that matched what my coworker had. And so I said, yeah, if you let me shoot football games this fall and be a little bit more like Slim, you got me. Like that's all I really want to do. And inside, I saw the need that the ACC had for another person in the video side. And so I just, in my deep down, I knew that if I stuck this out, I just had this gut feeling that I could ultimately go full time. And so February kind of rolls around and I'm on a shoot with my coworker Slim. And I told him about kind of what could happen. And my coworker Slim's just like, why? Why do you want to come back and be an intern again? Like, you could be a full timer. There's no question about, like, he's like, you're just as good as anyone else out here. You could easily do this. And I was like, yeah, but I really like this place. I really like what I get to do now. I know I'll get to do more next year. And I may have told him, I said, I got a feeling that I might be able to go for real full time, if you will, be more of a staff member as opposed to a full time intern. Because as an intern, I was doing things that were basically full time, and they hadn't had someone, I think, as an intern who had as much video shooting experience. They had kids before that were great editors who could archive, but I don't know that they had someone who had as much experience shooting as I had, and that's definitely an area of use that they needed, along with the social media stuff that would come future, later on, as an asset for them. But, so I talked to him. I talked to, I think, Jay Garneau, because he was at Wake Forest, and they're like, dude, you can get a full-time job elsewhere. Why would you take another year as an intern? I knew that I had this feeling if I did another year, it would pay off. And I like it. I like it here in Greensboro. I like what I get to do. And so I did it, and it worked out. April of the next year, so 2017, starting to apply for jobs. It's like, man, maybe it won't work out. And then finally, after the Final Four is over, I get pulled in the office by my boss, Scott, and the person who oversees him, Amy, and they let me know, hey, we want to bring you on as full-timer, assistant director of advanced media. How do you feel about that? And I was just like, man, I feel great. And I was like, honestly, and that's what I told him. I said, honestly, the best part about this is I'm going to stop applying for jobs. I hate applying for jobs. But so I joined officially July of 2017 as an assistant director, and it's been awesome. That waiting and that learning paid off so much at the beginning, because doing that allowed me to understand how important it was to take care in, there, obviously I learned at Western to take care of equipment, but they had different equipment, and to learn how to use those equipment in that way was so beneficial, because you can never stop growing in this. And so those first 6 months, being able to be willing and humble enough to say, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to listen. I'm going to do what they say and hope that it pays off, where I get to actually start shooting more frequently.
And invest in yourself.
Exactly.
That's what you did. And so, Andrew, can you tell especially the students, what kind of things that you do? Because I think it's interesting. I'm sure people say all the time when they say, well, what do you do for your job when you go to a football game, a basketball game, et cetera?
Right. So, give you the quick summary is I cover all of our media events and our championships and any or other sort of editorial content, whether for, on the video board at the basketball tournament or social media now, whatever it is, we do it under the ACC umbrella. There are ACC Network, which is not me, ACC Digital Network, which is also not me. But so that's kind of the summary. But so I get to shoot football regular season games. And from a conference perspective, it's interesting because if I'm shooting Duke versus Pittsburgh, I'm not going for one I'm going for both. There are certain situations where maybe we need more footage of Kenny Pickett, the quarterback at Pitt, because we need to get extra footage of him where I focus on that. But you're taking all these different storylines and you're kind of keeping them in the back of your head. And it's like, okay, we have an offensive lineman award. Nobody shoots offensive linemen.
Yeah.
But I do, because we're not going to get the footage from anywhere. So it's like, okay, the guy at NC State who went number 7 to the Panthers, Icky, everyone knew this guy was going to probably win the award. So we shot like 5 NC State games by chance. And every single game, we made sure to get a couple shots of this guy because we knew he was going to win our Jacob Blockings Award. We knew he was going to get drafted high. And so you have these different things that a lot of the schools and the media aren't really focusing on because they're focusing on the game. But for us, it's a little bit more creative where, we want the touchdowns because that makes great for PSAs or other promotional social media content. But we also need to get shots of the great players. Like the amount of Trevor Lawrence stuff I have is probably way over necessary, but we have all this great stuff that looks like NFL Films quality content because, we've kind of tried to make it look that way. We want it to look as good as it can. And, that's just something that we take a lot of pride in is our shooting. And so we get a lot of these different kind of angles or different kind of thoughts that we think of. And other times we do shoot the game, we get game winners and stuff like that. And so I shoot football regular season. I shoot regular season basketball, which is a little bit more standard where you're shooting highlights. Maybe Zion, you get a couple extra shots of him, but basketball, they're going to score. So, you're going to get shots of these guys most nights. And then I cover championships. Championships for us are huge. We're at every single one. Doesn't matter if it's football or field hockey. We're at that championship and we're covering it. In different years, it's looked differently. Some years we've done it more traditionally where it's like a traditional media member because there's not as many people shooting the soccer highlights. And so we need to shoot it for our own purposes. And then other times for soccer, like this past year, we mic'd up the head coaches and we did kind of a more production side of it where we got to listen to what everything these coaches say during the sidelines and try and push out content during the game to show a different side of things to get people to watch us because what's different from what we're doing versus what others are doing. So we do a lot of conference championship perspective. I've gotten to do some NCAA championships. My first national championship I shot was actually field hockey. They won, so it was great. It was in Michigan, Syracuse over Carolina, so we knew we were going to win it one way or the other. And then I got to shoot some CFPs. So I've gotten to go to the Fiesta Bowl a couple times, Sugar Bowl. I've gotten to go to a lot of really cool, a lot of exciting places through that experience. And then obviously spring is honestly our winter and spring because you got so many Olympic sport championships you don't even think about. Track, women's basketball, I got to shoot all 15 games for women's, all 15 games for men. And so there's a lot more to it than you think. During our tournament, we usually have enough people that we rotate, so you're not literally shooting every single one of these games individually, but you're there, probably 10 in the morning, 11 in the morning, and you're shooting till potentially midnight, 1 in the morning, these conference tournaments. So for us, we're different than if you're working at a school where your regular season's probably really difficult and your conference seasons or your conference championship season a little bit lighter because it's away. But for us, it's kind of the opposite. Regular season's still busy. Those championship moments are huge for us. I mean, there are moments that we want to tell those stories. We want to have that great footage and whatnot. So,
and can you talk a little bit about the importance of just not only social media, but really we're talking about video content. People want to, because, it helps bring attention to whatever organization. Now, your particular organization, the ACC, is, they are directing all about sports. But I mean, all these kind of things translate well because you are helping and it's really needed, I think, even more in today's age that so many people want good storytellers.
Right. And you have to stand out. I think that's the things you need. When it comes to social media, you need your first couple seconds of video to stand out. Because if it doesn't stand out, it's going to blend in with everything else. Right now, it feels like if you're a brand, you can't just tweet something out. You have to tweet it with a piece of graphic. You have to tweet it with a video link, whatever it is. Because if you don't, you kind of just scroll by it seems like. And so whether it's graphics or videos, it's a need almost for everything you announce. And so for us, that's a lot. We announce our football schedule. Well, we need a graphic for that. We'll have the NBA draft, I think in 2 weeks from now. So I'm currently making videos for each of those guys that could get drafted. I'm probably going to make 18 videos, each one for each individual player, but probably 10 of them get drafted. But we need to tell our story, because if we don't tell our story, who will tell our story? And being a conference, we have 15 stories to tell that are different. And then we have our own, so really 16. And so obviously with basketball, we're such a big player in basketball. And so you want to make sure you're telling that story, because you don't want it just to be about, oh, Duke had 5 guys drafted. They did, but the ACC as a whole had 10. And so you want to tell that story of what's successful about the ACC. What are we doing in our communities, or whatever other ways as well. It's not just on the field, but off the field. Our conferences, or our conference, our schools are really, we really like the academic side. You have universities that are private, such as Duke, that are well known for their academics, but on surface level. But all of our schools, if you look at all the rankings that they do for academics, all of our schools are almost in the top, I think it's like 10 or 11 are in the top 60. Like, there's a lot of universities out there. So the fact that we have that many in the top 60 is huge. And so being able to show via video is a great way to grab people's attentions, to show you compelling video. I'm a drone pilot now, and so I'll get some scenics of our campuses, and that footage is so helpful for us. But I also give that footage to the schools, because the schools don't always have time to do the kind of stuff that we get to do. And so like today, I was on my Facebook scrolling, and I saw this Duke sponsorship with one of their medical people. And I was like, hey, that's my shot. That's my shot there. And, it was at the track and field championship, because they can't cover every single championship. And so by me shooting that track stuff and giving it to them, that's not only letting us use that for promotional stuff, but now Duke's using that runner running and doing whatever sponsorship as well, and telling, their own story that way, or their own promotional content. So that's why for us, it's so huge, because we're not just benefiting ourselves. We look at ourselves as a service to our schools. If our school says, hey, do you have that Wake Forest basketball game from 1996? We go back in our archive and we look for them and we hand it off to them, because that's what we feel like we should be doing. And so for us, archiving is such a huge thing for what we do. And so that's kind of like the unsung hero for this content. During COVID, when you couldn't do anything, we relied on our archives. That's how we did a lot of content, was what we did Throwback Thursdays, Flashback Fridays, because of this archive. And how do you keep telling your story when there's no stories kind of happening right now?
Now, this is going off the script a little bit, Andrew, because I'm just really curious about this, because I know the kind of stuff you get to shoot. And normally for somebody that has a video portfolio, you put your best stuff at the very beginning, which means like this may be what you thought was your best shot. Tell me about your best video that you have on your portfolio. What are you most proud of that you say that's cool?
So I don't know if I'd say, so I feel like there's two answers, because I'm a drone pilot. I kind of have like two answers to that. So I think the first answer is my favorite drone shot I've ever gotten, which this would be the start of any reel I make if I were to make one about my career, was I was shooting the field hockey championship at Boston College, and the time of year is November. And so for droning, you always want to drone during golden hour, sunrise or sunset. So sunrise in November in Boston is about 4 or 5 o'clock. I think it's like 5 o'clock in the morning. So I got to get about 4:30 to go get it. Most of the time you do this and you don't get a lot of success. It's just a normal sunrise, nothing exciting. Well, shout out to Nick Stewart, also WIU alum. He sent me this website that I use that kind of gives you a probability chance. And so I saw that it was red, which means could be great. And so sky could be red. And so I get in this shot of BC's iconic building. And sure enough, it's orange and red pop in the background. This is a beautiful shot. The football stadium's in the background. They kind of got those, not the hard stadium lights, but the lights just lit enough that you can see the field. And it's this beautiful shot. There's a lake in the shot. And so it's this really cool scenic shot of BC's campus. Is that easily drone shot wise? That's probably number 1A. Number 1B is when I went to Peru. I hiked this mountain called Rainbow Mountain, and I about passed out a couple times because it's so high in the
Yeah.
sky. Like
Yeah.
the people who take you there tell you you're only allowed to be at the top for 30 minutes, and then they make you go down because you're not used to that altitude. And so I'd asked him beforehand, I'm like, hey, do you care if I fly my drone? He's like, all right, I'm just trying to do it hidden. And so I got a beautiful shot. I felt like I was about to pass out, but I got this, probably 3 minutes shooting with the drone before I put it down. But it's just, it's just beautiful, beautiful shot of the mountains down there in Peru. But those are my two favorite drone shots. But when it comes to action, it's tougher because like I just shot our baseball tournament last week. And even though baseball might not stand out to everyone, I was trying different things at baseball. I got these really cool kind of crisp shots. But ones that are probably more noteworthy, Zion Williamson had a 360 dunk against Clemson in Cameron Indoor Stadium. It's probably the shot that people use all the time. And I got that same shot, but from our cameras. So it's slow-mo, super high quality. It's a great shot. I went wide so that way you could kind of see his head to toe a little bit. And then I zoomed in as he dunked it, but it was an incredible dunk. I got this classic, I always call it like the classic NFL film shot. If you've seen the Peyton Manning shot, it's where he does this. I have that exact shot of Trevor Lawrence. I was shooting on a 2 to 600. I doubled it up. So it was 1200. And so I could get literally this tight on people, but I got this great shot. I kept the focus the way where it needed to be. And it was an awesome shot. And so it's kind of like those little moments where people wouldn't really notice it, but me as the shooter, like, yeah, like that, you don't know what went behind to get that shot, especially with drone stuff. But those little moments going to the CFP and shooting some of those highlights are so exciting because it's such a big deal. But the cool thing I always tell people is from shooting from a conference office perspective is I don't really get nervous shooting when it comes to shooting championship moments because I've done it so much. Like that's probably one of the best things about it is, I'll talk to someone who won a national championship in basketball as a videographer, and they'll be like, yeah, my shot's not the greatest. I was a little excited. And for us, we do it so much that we don't really have that shakiness in our shot. It's just rock solid as if it was, Duke playing Middle Tennessee State. It's as solid as that because we're so used to it, and it's not, we know where to go. We know what moments to look for.
Right.
I got this incredible shot of Georgia Tech's player winning the men's basketball tournament last year where he's crying to my camera. And it's just, I'm the only one there. There's no one else around me. I'm the only one getting the shot. And he's crying how excited he is. His name is Jose Alvarado. So he's kind of doing great things in the NBA right now. But he's just known for his personality. And so I ended up seeing what he was doing. So I started following him. And then after he does that for a few seconds, he runs on top of the scorer's table. So I'm one of the few who got that shot. And then he runs to the tunnel where I knew his family was. And he's crying to his baby girl in tears. And no one else got that shot. But I did because, you're used to the championship moments. When you can do things like that and kind of not miss the key celebration. And then there's also two of us. And so you can kind of, work together in that route where I'm getting that while he's getting whatever else is going on. So that Jose shot really stands out. And then probably the Zion and Trevor, if you had to make me, but there's so many game-winning shots I've gotten to shoot because almost every men or women's basketball tournament, baseball tournament, there's always a walk-off. There's always a buzzer beater.
The drama.
There just always is. Out of 14 games, the probability for us is there's going to be one, if not multiple. So.
Well, it's been, and you and I could talk for hours about all the fun stuff you get to do, but it's that point in the podcast, Andrew, where we ask our guests to talk a little bit about advice that you might have for a young person.
So I have a couple things. I talked a lot about some of these things, but I want to specifically say them because I think they're important. But you need to create meaningful friendships with professors and peers. I mean, Buzz, obviously our relationship, it means a lot for a lot of different reasons, and being able to have those good relationships later in life and currently as a student can mean a lot. There's the time that MTV called you looking for someone to be a driver for the TV show Catfish. I was there in the right spot at the right time, but if you didn't have some trust in me, you probably wouldn't have said something. You probably would have went and found a different student. And so being able to have people trust you matters. When you are doing anything broadcasting or career-wise, work like someone's watching. And I don't mean, oh my gosh, you have to be in your face, in your camera, whatever. You also need to have fun with it. Like you need to look like you're a good teammate, not look like you need to be a good teammate. But if you can't tell that, that kind of hurts you a little bit in that route. And so I think working as a professional in a friendly way matters, because you never know when something like that is going to end up working in your favor. We didn't get to talk about it, but real quick, when I was shooting our ACC championship game for football, the reason I got to go to my first CFB experience was because this guy saw me hustling, and he worked for the ACC DN, so not directly affiliated, but we knew each other. And he came up to me and said, "Hey man, I don't know if I've ever seen someone work as hard as you do right now." And 3-4 days later, my boss gets an email from him asking if I can be their video guy as their videographer for the whole week at the Fiesta Bowl. And that first event, me going there, led to us realizing I should go every year to the semi or whatever it is. And so there's so many examples, I'm sure, in other people's lives, so that someone saw you work hard and in a good teammate manner, and they recognized you, whether it was with a special project or a job. When doing job interviews, you're not the only one being interviewed. You are interviewing the place of work as much as they are you. I didn't realize that on interviews. I was too nervous, and I always thought, gosh, I have to be on my best behavior. But realistically, you also need to be able to evaluate them. You need to think about that, because workplace culture matters. If you don't like where you work, it's going to suck. And so being able in those moments to not only try and do your best for the interview, but also be a listener and see what kind of place that is important. So as a student, I never thought about that. It wasn't until I went to a seminar later on as an intern that I heard that. I was like, man, that's great advice. I didn't think about that. And then find the balance of enjoying your time while in school and working hard. I probably worked a little bit more than I necessarily needed to, but it worked out for me. But I always made sure to have fun. And I think that's something that's important, is you need to have fun in college. It is college. You need to enjoy your time, but you need to also work hard. There are too many examples of kids waiting till their senior year to do something. And it's like, man, if you could have taken that energy sooner, your opportunities in college would have occurred quicker, or they would have happened at all. But you also don't want to be in a situation where all you do is work and you don't enjoy your time, because college is an unforgettable memory of your life. Typically you only get 4 years in college. And so you want to remember those fondly, but you also want to make use of that time. So that balance, I think, is really important.
Yeah. Good advice. Finding the balance. Andrew Bacon, it's been great talking with you. I'm proud of you.
Thank you, guys.
And you are right. Yeah. And we are good friends, and yes. And I'm glad that you came from Chatham Glenwood to WIU those many years ago.
Same here.
And thanks to all of our weekly viewers out there. If you're interested in being a guest in the podcast, just make sure to send an email. We want to hear from you. We also hope that you continue to watch and listen to the podcast, and really appreciate everyone's support. So until next week, stay safe, take care, and God bless.